Hey, I'm Adrian, one of the hosts of After Adult Podcast. My porn name should be Mozart Fremont, but you probably know me better by my actual porn name, Siri.
I'm Rachel, but my porn name would be Woody 16th Avenue.
After Adult is a podcast about life and porn.
I don't actually watch porn.
I don't really watch that much porn either. I probably watch more than you, but I mean, most of the time it kind of would feel like going to work on my day off.
You 100% watch more than me, because I don't watch porn. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for After Adult.
Or visit afteradult.com and follow us on Instagram at afteradult.
Welcome to the Peep Show podcast.
News and stories from the sex industry.
With Jessie and PJ Sage. Welcome back to another episode of the Peep Show podcast. This week I talked to Adrie Rose about being an out sex worker in academia, banking discrimination, sex work politics, and living in Pittsburgh. Who misses free and affordable ads and social networks without the anti-sex work rhetoric? Assembly 4 is a team of sex workers and technologists in Melbourne, Australia, aiming to bring back free and fair advertising and social spaces to the sex working community. They also give back to organizations based in harm reduction, sex work, and education. Stepping away from the clunky design of traditional platforms, their two products, Tryst.link and Switter.at, are refreshing and well-needed changes in both presentation and mission. Both are free to join and open to all. In the words of an A4 user, from the policies to the language to the advice and tips, it makes such a big difference to feel encouraged and supported instead of policed. Check out their website, assembly4.com, for the word and not the number, for more info.
Hello, this is Chelsea Poe from TroubledFilms.com. I'm here to tell you about getting access to hot BDSM, queer, trans, and dyke porn all in one place. With code PEEPSHOW21, you can get 21% off your next order from TroubledFilms.com. Again, that's code PEEPSHOW21, TroubledFilms.com.
I'm here today with Adrie Rose, who is a Pittsburgh-based freelance writer, photographer, and former sex worker. As a sociology grad student, she focuses on the way social media sites and financial institutions treat sex workers post-Sesta Fosta. As a writer and photographer, she prioritizes Black mental health, Black life, and Black culture. In her free time, she works with returning citizens on their reentry and restorative justice journey. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm so glad to finally get the chance to do this.
I'm so surprised that we live in the same city and have actually never met in person.
You know, it's funny. It'll be 4 years in August that I've been in Pittsburgh, and everyone that I talk to, because we run in very similar circles, everyone that I talk to simply assumes that you, PJ, and I are like the best of friends. And I'm always like, I've actually never met them. We talk a lot online, but we've never actually met in person.
Yeah, well, we should be. We should change this. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a mutual person that we know, and she was saying something about you, and I was like, actually, I've never met her in real life. And she's like, what? And found it very shocking. But yeah, we need to fix this. And you just said before we started recording that you're fully vaccinated, and we now are too. So the whole world is changing. Thank God.
Amazing. Somewhat marginally close to normal, whatever that means anymore.
Yeah. I mean, at least we can actually like see some people a little bit.
This is such Yinzer stereotyping, but my friend and I, she just hit the 2-week mark post-vaccination as well. and she and I were talking about how much we just want to go to a bar and drink something that came out of a tap. And we're both pretty close to East Liberty. So as a joke, I said we should go to Primanti's because they have outdoor seating on Penn Avenue. And she took me seriously. So apparently on Friday, we're going to Primanti's.
Oh, that sounds fun. Because I'm not from here. Like, I don't like the food. But then everyone I talked to, including Joanna Angel, we had her on the show a couple of weeks ago, and she's like, I love Pittsburgh. I love Permane Brothers. And I was like, really? Does anybody really like that place?
There's so many better restaurants in Pittsburgh.
I know. But that's just kind of a Pittsburgh institution. So I think people feel like they have to go there.
I mean, if you come to visit me in Pittsburgh and you're not from here and you ask to go to Primanti's, I'm going to take you literally anywhere else.
We should tell people who have never been there. Permane Brothers is like this restaurant in Pittsburgh. There's like a handful of them, and they have these super greasy sandwiches. And on top of the sandwiches, they put really greasy French fries and then coleslaw and then smash the whole thing together.
But it's not like coleslaw in, I guess, the traditional sense. It's really dry and it's made with vinegar. And like,
it's like the Eastern European kind of coleslaw.
I don't know. Eating a Permane sandwich always feels like exercise, and I don't enjoy it.
Like how to get that in your mouth.
Yes.
It's so
and it's dry, so you have to chew it.
It's really not good. It's really not good. But yeah, lots of people like it. So I don't know. PJ was telling me, because I'm not from Pittsburgh, that like it was on the docks and like the workers would come up when they were delivering goods or whatever and get those sandwiches, and they were like the whole meal in one sandwich. And that was the point of them.
That's what I've heard. And all of that is really cute or whatever, but it's 2021. And
yeah.
I want to sit down and eat a sandwich with a side of fries like a civilized human being.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Call us high maintenance. Yeah. So you are a sociology grad student, and you're working on issues of what it's like to trade sex post FOSTA SESTA. What's it been like to be a grad student working on sex worker issues?
So, full disclosure, when I started school, I didn't want anything to do with sex work as a research focus. Like, I've always been very open about the fact that I hated sex work because I'm not crazy about dealing with men.
Right.
And grad school,
and you have to do that in sex work? Yeah.
It's kind of non-negotiable. Yeah. So
yeah.
Going back to school was supposed to be my way out of it because I did a couple of Americorps terms, and like that obviously didn't turn out the way that everyone promised it would.
What were you hoping to get out of Americorps?
A job.
Yeah. Okay.
Health insurance, maybe. A home.
Yeah.
None of those things happened. So I decided to go back to school, and going back to school was supposed to be my ticket out of sex work. Again, obviously that didn't happen because I wasn't making any money. Initially, I wanted to study the rise of white nationalism in Western Pennsylvania, and that was very difficult to do in Pittsburgh, which is, according to the FBI, a hub for white nationalism. So it was like making a target of myself, and I didn't want to do that.
Oh, yeah. You mean it was difficult because of that? Or was it difficult because there's not a lot of that work going on? Or what made it difficult?
It was really difficult to do that work already, but especially as a Black woman, I realized very early on that I was going to make a very public target of myself by, because like there was no way I was going to be able to research it by infiltrating these groups. So I was going to have to make myself very clearly opposed to what they were doing. And that might work for white people, but I'm not white. So that was simply never going to turn out the way that I wanted it to. So very quickly I had to refocus. And I was like, well, people are studying sex work, but it's almost always conflated with trafficking. So there's definitely something there. And part of the issue was finding faculty that would be willing to work for me. Now, Pittsburgh is relatively small. The academic community here is really small. So I was lucky enough that, and I only applied to one school and got in.
I had the same experience. I only applied to one school too and got in. And it was the same place.
Yes. So working with the faculty in this particular department, in the sociology department, has been such a joy. I'm out to almost everyone in the department. No one has tried to ruin my life, which is pretty common when you're a sex worker in academia. So that's nice. But it just so happened that I ended up really forming a relationship with a professor that went on to become my advisor. And I didn't want anything to do with prison reform or criminal justice or restorative justice, but there are two people in the department that work on prison reform and criminal justice, and they both just happened to be the people I had a connection with. And they were both really encouraging and helping me figure out what it was that I wanted to research. And when I decided that it was going to be sex work, they were both in my corner. So
that's great.
Part of that is because it's a sociology department, and they tend to be a little bit more liberal anyway, because it's a fairly conservative school, and it's a small school. So people talk, but no, everyone in the department has been super encouraging. I've had a lot of great experiences, and no one's really ever told me no, which is fun.
That's amazing. It's amazing to me that you've had that experience there. How have you been weaving the criminal justice and restorative justice aspect into your work, or is that kind of just something that you do because your advisor does it?
So it's something that I fell into. I actually had a project one year that I ended up doing with some returning citizens who were in a policy class that I was taking. And I really just fell in love with that group of guys, and the relationship sort of developed from there. And they so they're part of a group that's trying to build housing for returning citizens. And without my knowledge, they elected me to the board of directors, and I found out in a meeting.
So now you're very involved.
Oh yes, there's simply no getting out of it at this point. Not that I would want to. I've built an entire project around my work with these guys, and it helps that, my advisor and I are both similar degrees of mentally ill. So being able to bounce ideas off of him and then insult him and be insulted by him, and we have a great rapport, and it helps because virtually of course, but we're spending a lot of time working together, especially right now.
That's amazing. That's a really, really good academia story.
Yes, and like I said, Pittsburgh is a really small city. The academic community is really small. I hear horror stories all of the time.
Yeah.
And I know how incredibly lucky I am that I've had such an amazing experience, especially doing the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy to hear that. So let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. What sort of research are you doing?
So right now I'm pretty much devoting all of my time to restorative justice and reentry because I got voluntold into a board membership. And I'm self-employed right now, but because of COVID, obviously people are not hiring photographers quite as much as they used to. And as much as I love writing, freelance writing is a special kind of hell. And I was just dealing with a media corporation. It took them 3 months to pay me. So I'm not crazy about it right now.
I hear you.
So most of my time is spent working with the guys on reentry, and then I'm also doing some self-guided research into financial institutions because I was on the Stripped by Sia podcast a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about that, so I had to get back in and update a paper that I had written.
Yeah. So, we were on a panel together last week, and one of the things that you were talking about is banking access and how that impacts sex workers. And I found that really interesting. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I did this obscenely long thread on Twitter about financial access for low-income people and sex workers. And part of that was driven by a research project that I had done. I took a GIS course, and we were supposed to come up with some project and map things. And I decided I was going to map physical bank access in Allegheny County.
I should say that Allegheny County is the county that Pittsburgh's in.
Yes. So southwestern Pennsylvania, it's actually a fairly large county, but as I was looking at it, I noticed that all of the physical bank locations in Allegheny County are sort of centered in and around Pittsburgh. The lower income communities that surround Pittsburgh have little to no access. There are entire towns and boroughs that have no physical bank locations in them. And so
yeah, that's really unbelievable.
So it was 2019 when I created that map. So some things might have changed since then, but in 2018, I want to say it is, across the United States, banks closed almost 2,000 more physical locations in low and moderate income communities than they did in communities that have wealth. So it's just not something that you think about, right? Because everyone that you know either has a bank account or like they use a pay app. But for sex workers, that issue is compounded so much more because the things that you have to do to get a bank account are simply not accessible to sex workers. Things like having a physical address. A lot of landlords will not rent to you if you're a sex worker because they could end up in federal prison on trafficking charges because they derive their income from someone else selling sex.
Right. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand. I mean, that's also true. Like, I think that is true for roommates who are having half of their rent paid from sex work money. It's true from like partners who have joint bank accounts with sex workers. Like, I think that we often don't think about, or we often don't talk about the impact that these sorts of laws have on people who aren't sex workers, who are like adjacent to sex workers in some way.
So this is something that I've been thinking about a lot because my partner is disabled. And I mean, already we will simply never get married because if you're disabled, you can't get married. They'll take away your health insurance and your benefits. But on top of that, it's very difficult for us to live parallel lives because for so long I derived my income from selling sex. And so he could go to federal prison even though I no longer sell sex, because if he lives in a home that is paid for by sex work, he could go to jail as a pimp.
Yeah, which is terrifying. I mean, that's the interesting thing is that like those charges are way, way worse than prostitution itself.
Right. And I mean, both of our lives would be ruined at that point. And it's simple for a lot of sex workers. I feel like financial institutions and getting access to those sorts of things, it's a game of calculated risk. So you can go open a personal bank account and hope that they don't audit you based on your transactions. But if they do audit you, now you can never have a bank account again. Or you can try to use one of the pay apps as an alternative. But if you
Except
use
those shut down sex workers all the time.
Exactly. So PayPal is the worst. I say this as someone that owns a quote unquote legitimate business. I hate using PayPal. Because if you get hit with a fraud claim, they'll just reach into your bank account and take your money.
Right.
But if you have Venmo or Cash App, which I think is popular with a lot of sex workers because they offer a debit card option and it basically functions like a bank account, but you don't have any of the legal protection. So if you have a bank account and they close your account, they're legally obligated to give you your money back. If you have a Venmo account that you're using as a bank account and they close your account, you have no legal right to the money in that account. They can simply keep it, which... If you don't have a bank account and you're using Venmo because they have a debit card, that means all of your money is in Venmo.
Right. And Cash App does that too.
Yes.
Yeah. And Cash App also, has a card that goes with it, and you can get an IBAN number and everything to use Cash App as a bank. But the problem with that is, like you said, your account can get shut down and all of your funds can get seized.
Hmm.
I'm so afraid of I mean, I do use those apps, but I'm so afraid of them that, I mean, and I say this obviously, I do have a bank account, but like, I pull my funds out like 2 seconds
Immediately.
after they show up and
Yes. And I tell people this all the time and I get a lot of pushback. People will say, well, I don't want to pay the fees. Suck it up.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Occasionally I'll leave $5 in there, but I'm in a much different position, right? I have a couple different bank accounts. I am
Right.
again, quote unquote, legitimate business owner. So I'm
Mhm.
at much less risk than most people. But the fees,
I know, it's
$20.
like just the cost of doing business. I don't know.
Yeah, because like
Yeah.
if you pull money out of Cash App, I think it's a couple dollars depending on how much you pull out. So if you pull out $20, it'll take a quarter. Eat the quarter. I don't
Really?
know what to tell you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I pull money out of Cash App all the time, and I don't think it seems to me like the same amount of money gets put into my bank account,
Well,
but
I
I
guess
don't
it
know.
depends on how. Okay, so if you pull it out instantly, you'll pay a fee for it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's if you like add it to your debit card or whatever. But if you pull it out through like an ACH deposit into your bank
Right.
account, then you don't
Then you don't
pay.
have that. Right, you're right,
Right.
you're right.
For some people,
Um,
like the difference, that instant difference is worth the fee.
right. Yeah, absolutely. Depending on what's going on with you. Yeah, I'm afraid of that, but also platforms too. I like behave the same way on platforms. I'm always shocked when I see like online sex workers who are like, "Look at how much money is in my OnlyFans account." And I'm like, "Are you guys crazy?" Like I can't imagine leaving like $10,000 in like a
That gives
platform.
me so much anxiety. And
I
I keep my mouth
Same.
shut because, that's their money. It's not my
Right.
business to police how you live or how you eat. But when I see people share screenshots of like $10,000 in their OnlyFans account, I get so much secondhand anxiety,
Me too.
not just because these platforms regularly close people's accounts and steal their money, but like, why would you put that on social media? There was a whole thing on Reddit a few years ago where very angry men were reporting people to the IRS and
I
saying that
know,
they
the
weren't
thought
paying their
audit, yeah.
taxes. Please take
They
your
had
money.
they had spreadsheets, like intense spreadsheets with
Hmm.
the usernames of everybody and all of the different platforms they worked on. Like, yeah, I totally agree with you. Like, it's not my business, but I look at that and it, like, freaks me out. I don't know how
No,
people do that.
I get very concerned, and I don't want to say anything because like been at this for almost 10 years and I just sound like a bitter old hooker, but I know what I'm talking about. I promise I'm right.
I know. Well, I think it's just that live and work in this business long enough, and you've like, I've lost money when Payoneer shut down, like
Oh
all
my
of my money
God.
in there disappeared, and or the money that I couldn't pull out like fast enough.
Mhm.
And we had like 1 day notice to get all of our money off those cards. And I think that I don't know. It just going through that enough and seeing as many of my friends that I have had all of their bank account shut down, their Cash App shut down, their Venmo, PayPal, pushed off Airbnb, like all of these
Yeah.
platforms, I I can't interact with them in a I'm trying to think of the right word, in a casual way.
Mm-mm. No,
I'm
and
always on the defense. I like need to make sure that I don't lose my money, and it's like this constant sense of anxiety.
I'm always iffy. I've lost bank accounts before. I had a Capital One account and I lost it because I was a hooker. There's no way around it. Like they were very open about the fact that I had violated their morality clause and they didn't want my business anymore. And they sent me a check
Yeah.
and told me I could never open another Capital One account again, which was distressing. But
Right.
got around it and figured out my life. And those sorts of lessons are very hard won. And I always hate to see younger sex workers going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
so much of this knowledge is, and I know post-Estafas, it's really difficult to share information with people because no one wants
Right.
to get caught up on a trafficking or facilitation charge. But so much
Sure.
of this information is out there, and it simply involves listening to the people that have done it before and know what they're
Mm-hmm.
talking about.
Right. Yeah, but I think it's really hard for young people who don't know where to access this information, or, I think it's at this point, like, for people like you and I, we're like in sex work communities, in conversation with other sex workers, like it's and have lived it. Like it's information that's just like a part of our world. I think that that's what makes Fosta Sesta so complicated is like I was on a panel recently with a young sex worker and then another person who's been in it for a long time at a university class, and I don't fault her at all for this, but she was like, the professor asked, like, well, how have things been post Fosta Sesta for you? And she didn't know what Fosta Sesta
Oh my God.
was because she's like relatively new. She started a year ago and she's only done sex work since Fosta Sesta. And then when we started talking about it, she's like, oh, yeah, like I remember when Tumblr like could no longer post when there
Oh,
couldn't be any
Jesus.
like but she's like, I didn't know what the reason for that was. And I was like, wow, I forget that there's like new people coming in who never worked before Fosta Sesta. That's part of the problem is that there's like so much like fear around like how do we share information with new people without
Right.
it being viewed as facilitation, or where do we disseminate this information without our accounts getting shut down or without being deplatformed? And that creates like a lot of anxiety around all of this.
So, bit of a personal anecdote.
Mhm.
I got into an argument some time ago with a younger sex worker because she was on Twitter asking, and I'll be honest, I'm old, I'm bitter, I'm jaded. My first thought when I see a lot of things on social media is this is a fed. But I was trying to be nice, and it was what appeared to be a younger sex worker asking if anyone would be interested in coming together and curating a book of advice on how to do sex work. And I was like, you should delete this immediately because
Yeah. Mhm.
they're going to come and they're going to question you about how long you've been a pimp. And she got very upset with me and she was like, I'm just trying to help the younger sex workers. And I was like, I'm trying to help you. You are a baby,
Yeah.
clearly.
Mhm.
I know
Mhm.
that you probably got into this after some recent legislation was passed, but I am telling you that there are feds all over social media and tweets like this get you thrown in prison. And she's
Yeah.
like,
Mhm.
well, there's legal sex work too. And I'm like, they tried to outlaw porn 2 weeks ago, my love.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And, as somebody who used to do more local organizing, one of the things that I came up across is that anytime I was in the media being like critical of how sex workers were being policed, I would get emails on my webpage asking, for dates and if I met in person. And it was so obviously correlated to like anytime I spoke up about policing,
Yes.
suddenly there was an influx of inquiries, and I was like, these are all police. Like,
Oh,
um,
absolutely. So,
yeah. So I mean, that's to say, I mean, that's also a personal note, but that's to say, like, people need to be careful about what they're saying.
oh no, absolutely. You and I were both interviewed recently by the city paper for an article about life post Fosta Sesta.
Right.
And
Mhm.
I was in a community meeting with some people that are known to both of us. And it was on Zoom. And I looked up and I had gotten a private message from someone. in law enforcement asking if I was okay and if I wanted to reach out, and that they were there if I wanted to talk. Are you insane?
Oh my God.
And it was like a .doj email address. And I'm like,
whoa. Did that person think that you were actually going to use them as a confidant?
This is my question. And you would think as long as the cops have been surveilling us, you would think that they would get smarter and better at doing this. And they continue to get worse, and it gets more comical every time.
Right. That's what I would think. I'd be like, are they for real? Like, yeah, I'm really going to tell them, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's all really like difficult. And that's another thing that I mean, I've been feeling this a lot too, that there's this thing that's happening in like some sex work organizing circles where people feel pushed to like disclose their work history in order to like prove legitimacy. And to me, that is very, very dangerous.
Oh, yes. I have been called, no, she didn't call me. She said, yeah, well, I'm an actual hooker, unlike this bitch who just studies them. Please Google me.
Yeah.
Okay? I hate to say it like that, but I've been at this longer than most of you have been legal. So please.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, and I think that rhetoric is like really dangerous though. And I've been trying to think about how to get across that like we as a community should stop engaging in this sort of gatekeeping, because it's just like incriminating people. And it seems to me like that should be obvious.
I think this is one of the problems with Sestafas, though, because it's really impacted our ability to build communities with each other. And so we become hyper vigilant and we become paranoid. And as a result, we start engaging in cop behaviors and forcing people to out themselves and admit to things that get us arrested and killed.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a really big problem. And I think that that's something that needs to be, we as like a community need to come together on. That we should like reflect on the implication of like that sort of pressuring people to disclose their work history in order to like prove legitimacy, or the gatekeeping that happens within like sex work circles.
Yeah, and I understand that the impetus is always to protect yourself and to protect the people in your community. But it's very difficult to build community if you're not going to let anyone in.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It really is. And these are all like really complicated issues, I think. But particularly for, I mean, in any community, but I think particularly for sex workers, because of the way that sex work is being criminalized.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it is like extending out beyond like in terms of porn and any sort of like erotic content at all.
I mean, even because we were talking about Airbnb on Twitter, it doesn't matter if you're actively engaged in a criminalized behavior or not. Airbnb is throwing people off for using OnlyFans in any capacity because they scrape your internet history every time you log in. Basically, I mean, any
terrifying.
sex is being criminalized at this point. You can't engage with any sexual content lest you be trotted out in front of the town to be publicly shamed.
Yeah. I was telling somebody that the other day because he messaged me, like somebody who's fairly new to photography, and said, oh yeah, I did this really like cool porn scene with somebody, with a model in this Airbnb. And I was like, don't do that. I know people who've been sued because the owners of the house have somehow come across like porn that like was shot in their house.
I have a friend who rented an Airbnb, and they ended up filming some content in the Airbnb. And when they left, they weren't as careful packing as they could have been. And they left an absolutely obscenely large dildo behind in the bathroom. And they got an irate message from the owner afterwards. And I know that it sucks and it's not fair, but like we have got to be more careful.
Yeah. It's just like part of being a sex worker, I think, is doing the things that we can do to protect ourselves, but that also protects other people. I think there is sort of like an ethic of care that is involved with kind of thinking communally about how to protect each other.
Hmm.
Yeah. So one of the things that you were talking about in your thread on banking was the best ways to use banks, and in a way that doesn't tip them off in any way. Like how do you think that sex workers could best, like, what are some of the ways that you think sex workers need to interact with the bank?
Sure. So if you are going to open a bank account, my first piece of advice is always going to be open a personal account. A lot of
Mhm.
people, in my experience, get caught up because they learn that you can write stuff off on your taxes when you file a Schedule C. And then
Right.
they go out and open up a business bank account, not realizing that business accounts are audited much more frequently and they're more heavily scrutinized. So, if,
Yeah, that's really interesting because I think people do wanna say, like, separate out their business stuff from their personal stuff.
listen, I get it. I do. I have a business PayPal account that has
Mhm.
absolutely no ties to my identity as a sex worker at all. So I get it. But at the same
Mhm.
time, you can't open a business bank account and deposit $10,000 in it and expect no one to call you. It doesn't work that way. So
Right, right.
I always say open a personal account as your first step. There's a little less scrutiny. And when you open a personal account, I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit, but when you use a personal account, they don't expect you to have high value or high dollar deposits. So if you're getting
Mhm.
paid out from a site like ManyVids or OnlyFans, it's actually in your better interest to set up recurring withdrawals on a very strict schedule. So if you are, I don't know, looking to buy a house or you're looking to open a credit card or something, they want to see that you have regular income coming in. It's the
Mhm.
same thing with a personal business or with a personal bank account. If you set up your withdrawals from OnlyFans or ManyVids where it's every 2 weeks and you set your threshold at like $500 every 2 weeks, it looks like you are getting paid.
Right. Mhm.
And so there's far less of a chance that they will randomly audit your account and say, hey, this looks suspicious. What they see is you getting reoccurring deposits on a regular basis, and they see that you
Mhm.
have a legitimate form of income.
Yeah. Would you suggest the same thing for cash deposits?
So for cash deposits, I am of two minds. The
Mhm.
first is that cash is bad. And I am biased. I moved here from Miami. I've been mugged more than once. I don't like carrying cash because it's very
Mhm.
difficult to replace.
Yeah.
However, I also know that more than 30% of every transaction in this country happens using cash. So I'm not naive. I say
Mhm.
if you are going to use cash, again, personal bank account, deposit it on a semi regular basis using an ATM. Don't go into the
Mhm.
bank because then they
Right.
will have your face on camera. Go to the
Yeah, yeah. Although
ATM
they have
and
cameras at ATMs too, though.
yeah, but you can't wear sunglasses into the bank.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
okay, that's
they
fair.
shoot
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
So I and I know this is really common for dancers.
Mhm.
After you wash your money, which is so much fun to me. On TikTok, there are all these videos of strippers literally washing their money, which is fascinating to me. But after you wash your money, take it to the ATM. I know you all have a collection of wigs, and I know that you all own sunglasses. So every 2 weeks, count up your coins, $500, walk over to the ATM in your wig and your sunglasses, and deposit it.
Yeah. I mean, that made a lot of sense when I read you talking about that, about doing it at like regular intervals. It made sense to me to do that instead of like, I'm depositing $1,500 right now and then nothing for 3 weeks and then,
Oh my God.
200 or whatever.
And I know that the impetus is, well, I have the money, so I'm going to spend it if I don't put it in my bank account.
Mhm.
Okay, it's time to start thinking like a business owner. Put it under
Right.
your mattress, out of sight, out of mind, and set up a regular
Mhm.
schedule for yourself. And I know I have ADHD. I get it. If I don't see it, I will simply forget that it exists. Set reminders for
Yeah.
yourself. Do whatever you need to do because it's not just an inconvenience. It is you establishing a financial history and it's you setting up a way to move in a society that values you
Mhm.
based on how much money you have.
Right. Right. And a culture that's like also set up on the ability to like establish credit and things like that, which you
Mhm.
can't do without bank accounts.
And okay, this is a little bit off topic. Venmo has started bombarding me and I'm sure other people with offers to open up a credit card. Please don't
Oh, me
do
too.
that.
Yeah. Mhm.
If you are a sex worker, do not open up a credit card with Venmo. Venmo is owned by PayPal, and PayPal is very much anti sex worker. Do not give
Yeah.
them any more ammunition than they already have to destroy your financial life, please.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that that's really important because I've been getting those like one every couple days and I just keep
Mhm.
junking them. I don't want a Venmo credit card.
No, I have one credit card, and that's the way it's going to stay.
I have some that I don't use that I just keep open because that have like zero balances because I don't know, they say it's better for your credit to not
Mhm.
close accounts. So,
So I want to say about 20 to 30% of your credit score is determined by the length of your credit history. So
mhm.
if you have a credit card that's been open for a few years, you don't use it, that's okay. It's better that you have it open and you carry a zero balance on it than you
Right.
close it and the age of your credit history drops.
Right. Credit is such a weird thing.
It is simply the worst system, and the fact that you can't opt out of it causes me
Right.
great distress.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that sometimes if you pay off your stuff, then your credit score could go down because they're trying to it's a mess. It's like I don't know.
So I'm in the process of trying to buy a house, and I cannot pay off my credit cards because if I do, my credit score will drop.
Yeah, and that's really bizarre.
It
Right. They wanna
is.
see that you're carrying a balance and paying it rather than that you don't have debt, which doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, and you need to have a certain debt to income ratio in order for your credit score to be good. So
Mhm.
I have no income currently,
Right.
but if I suddenly have no debt, my credit score will drop, which doesn't make sense to me.
Right. No, it doesn't make sense. None of it makes any sense. Yeah. I mean, this is actually really timely given that, like, it's tax season right now. So,
Hmm.
like,
That is
it's
my other
interesting.
advice. File your taxes.
What do you put as your job for the money that you claim? Do you like,
So
I say like consultant or something?
I file two Schedule Cs. One
Mhm.
as a writer and a blogger, whatever that
Yeah.
category is, and then I file the other as either a consultant previously or a photographer currently.
Yeah, mhm, I do consultant too, and then I also have writing income, obviously, so I do that. But so it sounds like I do something really similar to you, but it's interesting to think about, like, how I think it's great to have another thing that you do that can kind of be, that you can kind of fold sex work into, like photography or,
Hmm.
a place to account where cash comes from if you have any cash income.
Well, so I joke that I'm now a real business owner as opposed to the last 10 years when I was doing all of the accounting and administrative work and so on and so forth. But I couldn't call myself a business owner. And I tell
Mhm.
people all the time The IRS does not care where you get your money from. They just want you to pay your taxes. And so many people get caught up because they want the money, but they don't want to pay their taxes on it. And Al Capone went to prison for tax evasion, and they put him in prison for almost the rest of his life. Pay your taxes, okay?
Well, yeah, but it's even more than that. I mean, we want to avoid prison, obviously, but it's more than that. It's like you want, so if the whole system doesn't crumble, and I'm not sure that it won't, but like you also want Social Security income and like other things that you need to be paying into so that you don't have to work until you're 95. Although, I say that and I'm quite concerned. I'm quite sure that the whole system's going to fall apart before we are old enough to participate in it. So I don't
absolutely. But for the time being, I am existing on unemployment. That is my only source of income right now because no one's hiring photographers. If I did not pay my taxes from the time that I had my first job at 16, I would have no unemployment. I wouldn't be able to file a claim.
Yeah, I mean, that's always my thought too, is I pay taxes on I keep spreadsheets and I pay taxes on all the money that comes in from all of the streams because I for the same reason, I don't want to get audited and like be in trouble, but like also there's so many systems that you can't participate in if you're not paying taxes.
Especially if you have children, which is another huge thing for sex workers. It's very difficult to provide for your child outside of the industry if you decide to leave. If you pay your taxes, your child has a cushion because you are paying into Social Security.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say that like I'm not like judging any sex workers who aren't paying their taxes, but I think there's a lot of good reasons why we should consider doing that to kind of protect ourselves.
So I want to be clear. My advice is obviously coming from a place of extreme privilege. Like I obviously navigate the world a lot differently than someone who is undocumented or someone that has a child because having children is not on God's list for me. But these sorts of things, these lessons that I have learned, they're extremely hard. One, for years, when I first moved to Pittsburgh, I tried to get away with avoiding taxes because paying local taxes is really stupid to me. But
yeah, it's really expensive to pay taxes in Pittsburgh because you have like your city and your state. Yeah.
I tried to get away with it. And in 2019, Jordan Tax Services hit me with a bill and they were like, you need to pay this or we're going to report you to the IRS. And I was like, all right, cool. It was only a couple $100 and I ended up overpaying it and they sent me a check, but then I had to pay taxes on the money that I had already paid.
Right.
In taxes.
Yeah. It's and it's also confusing though because when you buy a house, like Jordan Tax Service also sends you bills for like sewage and water, and I'm like, what is this company? Yeah.
I've never heard of Jordan Tax Services before I moved to Pittsburgh, and I want nothing to do with them ever again.
Well, yeah, and also, like, when you call them, and I mean, this is so, like, in the weeds Pittsburgh that most people probably won't care about this, but, like, when you call them to, like, ask about your sewage bill, for example, they'll tell you that you're calling a debt collector and they're recording your call and it may be turned in. Yeah. Like, what? Like,
now I
just
have no incentive to call you.
Yeah, you're like, I just want to know about my water bill. I'm actually not like, I don't want to call debt collectors. Thank you.
No, I've been avoiding them for a really long time.
Right. Right. Anyways, yeah, do you want to talk? We should probably wrap this up, but like, tell me a little bit before you go about your photography that you do.
Sure. So largely what I'm doing right now is headshot photography because it's simple to do outside, and also pet photography. I love pets. I will happily come and play with your dog for an hour and then charge you for it. So if that's something that you're interested in, please hit me up on my website. But no,
That's a good business.
It is, right? And it actually pays pretty well when I can get work. But I am trying to move into photojournalism and documentary photography because I'm already writing, and I would love to get paid, or I would love to chase down media corporations to pay me 3 months after I turn in my photos. So
right.
that's something that I'm also interested in, but I'll also be going back to school full-time in the fall. So I'll probably be putting all of that on hold for a while.
Yeah. Are you starting a PhD?
I am not.
Okay.
I am not. I don't want to leave Pittsburgh just yet. And I'm really in love with the faculty that I'm working with. So I think I'll stick around for a little while.
Yeah. Cool. So where can people find your photography and your art and hire you to play with their dog and all of the things you're doing?
Yeah. So you can find me at Adrie Rising on all social media. That's Instagram and Twitter. I have a TikTok, but I don't actually understand how it works. So don't look for me on there.
I don't understand how it works either.
I don't know what I'm doing. That is for another generation, and I'm okay with that. Rapidly approaching 30, and I'm so good with that. As for photography and those sorts of things and how to hire me, my website is adrierose.link, LINK. So you can check out my work there, and you can hire me, and you can schedule some photo shoots, but other ones, I'm sorry, you'll have to be a grown-up and send me an email that I may or may not respond to that week.
Great. It was really fun to talk to you.
Thank you. And I'm so glad that we finally got to do this.
I know. It's really nice to actually talk. And we can actually meet at a restaurant somewhere. Not Permanis, though.
No.
Not that place.
Once a year is my limit for Permanis.
Thank you for joining us for yet another episode of the Peep Show podcast. I'm PJ Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at PeachSage.
And I'm Jessie Sage, and you can find me on Twitter at sapiotextual or at jessiesage.com.
We would like to remind you that we have a Patreon account and would appreciate your support. Please visit patreon.com/peepshowpodcast. Our music is courtesy of Joe Kennedy. The show was produced by Jessie and PJ Sage.
Signing off. Have a great week.